What's up, everybody? We're back and we have an exciting special guest with us here tonight, Miss Allie Rigoli. She is a pro scouting manager with the Marlins and she's excited to be here tonight with us. We're excited to have her. Allie, how you doing?
I'm good. We're in the middle of spring training, nothing to complain about, so happy to be here.
We know this is an exciting year, not just for baseball, but for the Marlins. And we're going to dive into that because this organization not only has grown so much on the field, but we got a couple things that we're going to talk about that have been happening off the field in the off season as well. So we're pretty pumped. I just cannot wait. And I think we need to just jump right into this and get started with your journey, Allie.
Oh boy. All right. Where do we start?
Why don't we start with the fact that you do come from a sports family. So kind of give us a little bit of background, how you grew up and kind of how you got involved with baseball.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the daughter of a scout. He's been in baseball for my entire life, pre me. I also have two older brothers, so I did not stand a chance to not be a tomboy growing up and find sports that way. So pretty early on, I was getting dragged to a field to watch a brother play at the minimum. And then it was time where I started playing, and then I was doing lessons. And it's like funny because I have like a distinct memory of like waiting for my dad to be done with lessons at our facility or the facility, whatever. And I was like drawing, coloring, and then like he'd be done with his lesson. And it's like, okay, my lesson now. Like, and it's just like the funny of like waiting till he was done till it was my turn. And pretty much grew up going to games with him. And it's funny because like we called them daddy-daughter dates at the time, and it was essentially take your daughter to work day because you'd just take me to games and I'd sit there and try to do what he did. So it was like the first few times, or when I was younger, it was like, okay, I'd take notes for like the first inning, and then I'd be like, I'm hungry, I want a snow cone. And then it would be like, as I got older and older, it would be like, okay, now I started taking notes for 4 innings, and then it was, okay, now I'm taking notes for the whole game, and I'm holding the radar gun, give me an extra stopwatch. And like, so it was like slowly progressing from just a little bit of like, I want to do what he does to like, okay, what are we talking about here? What are we looking at? Like, let's talk about this and have more of those conversations. So I was definitely lucky to kind of be around that at a very early age. Kind of clicked then where it was like something I had said, like, oh yeah, I want to work in baseball, but like that was when it was like, okay, but how? Like, how do you actually do that?
Right.
So I kind of like gives a little bit of where the interest came from and grew, I guess.
We all kind of knew, especially growing up around sports, that we wanted to stay in that field because it is what you're passionate about. You spend so much of your life and your early years and time doing that. And so when you went to Ramapo and you played softball there, and before we get into that, I found it so interesting that you majored in mathematics and accounting, and I want to know how you decided to go that route and how it connects to kind of what your plan was to work in baseball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. My dad's actually a math major. I don't think that was entirely his plan either, but there's the odd connection there that he is math minded, I guess, like me. So I had my high school calc teacher was huge. Just, I loved his class. I spent all of my extra time there with him, was like, okay, I like math. I think analytically, this is something I want to do. So I started to look at engineering, mathematics for when I was applying to schools, that was what I wanted to major in. And the game, statistics have always been a part of the game, whether that's now or they're advanced statistics now or what it had been in the past, that's always been a part of it. So it was like, okay, well, that's a different route. So as opposed to kind of being sports management, which is a lot of what people have in the background, and it's not a bad background to go into, but it was kind of like, okay, how do I differentiate myself? Math is something I'm interested in and I like, so I could go into that and kind of veer it into like, well, I'll spend my internships doing baseball specific and I'll spend my education doing math specific. Oddly, so I went in as a math major. That was the first start, and then I had done enough stuff kind of in high school that set me up pretty well for where I had the space to take extra classes and take extra credits. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do a double major. And then as much of baseball is a game, it is a business. So I immediately went into like, okay, well, a business background wouldn't hurt. And accounting was kind of what would lend itself to it. And something that I was numbers, it's something that made sense to me. To have a lot of accountants in my family. So it was something that just kind of made sense of baseball as a business. And at the end of the day, we're also going to have to work with our business side to make decisions. So it was something that I could help kind of mend both of those, although independently don't sound sports related. Sports is an entertainment industry. It's a business. It's all of those things as much as it is a game. So it's definitely a different background, but somewhat intentional at the same time.
Right.
I think what was very exciting about your resume was not only did you take this passion that you had, you were able to blend your passions, like you said, right? And the cool thing is, while you were still being an athlete, while you were still being a student, while you were still kind of figuring out your path and your journey for what you wanted, you were also worked very hard to get some pretty incredible internships, and you blended both. You had a couple minor league or just other team internships on top of being a softball player and a student athlete full time, which is a really heavy responsibility. It doesn't matter what level you're at. What a lot of people don't see sometimes is that, like you said, sports is a business. Being a student athlete is a business. Like, that's a full-time job. Something that stood out to me was you took this finance and this mathematical passion and you took baseball and you wound up becoming the finance intern at the commissioner's office. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because not only is that an incredible internship and early experience to have, but what did that entail?
Yeah, for sure. The one thing I do want to say that like you kind of sparked as you were going there is like, my mom gave me great advice when I took my first internship, was like, you're going to find out one of two things. You're either going to find out that you love it or you hate it. And both are important. Like it didn't matter whether or not you loved this internship. It was like, you were going to find out something about yourself. You're either going to find out that this is what you want to do. I like this, this, and this, or it's like, I hate that. I don't want to do that. And like, both of those things are important for kind of figuring out your own path. Right. So that was kind of like the approach I took to what internships I got. You know, it was just like, we're going to see what we can learn from this and whatnot. But yeah, the finance one is interesting because they have an internship program, which is interesting because most people don't think of the commissioner's office. And I hadn't thought of the commissioner's office right away. And it was kind of recommended to me like, hey, look on their site and whatnot. And they have an internship opportunity. They have a program for the summer. And I think you put like the top like 3 departments that you were interested in. Like, obviously then I had the accounting degree in there, so it lended itself to that. But like, there's a baseball operations department that I had put down and whatnot. But just being part of the finance one showed me all of the different opportunities that are at the commissioner's office that I didn't even know about. Like, they had a speaker come from each of the departments kind of like every week. So you got a little bit of an insight into everything, where it was like, for me in particular, like the labor relations department was something that I had never known about, thought about, like, or anything like that. And my internship there was like the first glimpse of like arbitration. And I was like, okay, like that's interesting. I like that. That's a different way of looking at the game that I've never looked at before. So it was definitely, it's funny because like you're used to going to a stadium and being at a stadium for games, and the commissioner's office at the time was Midtown Manhattan, right on Park Ave. It's like, it's since moved, but it's still like hustle bustle of the city. You're not walking out and seeing green grass in a stadium. So it's
right in the heart.
It's so much more like the business of baseball, and you're seeing it there. But at the same time, we walked into the office and like the tile looks like a field, and like there's memorabilia everywhere. So you still get that, like that heart and soul that all of you have in common, regardless of whether or not you know the person next to you. But so that was definitely like a way to get in and be exposed to something that if I didn't have an accounting background, like they probably wouldn't have considered me for that, you know? So it was definitely helpful to kind of come from a different perspective, even if it wasn't the department that I didn't go in necessarily with the idea of like, I want to be an accountant, but I thought, hey, that experience and that degree can help me kind of weasel my way into baseball somehow, you know?
I can't help but think when I first thought, okay, we're gonna interview Allie, and immediately my head went to, oh my God, her story is not necessarily in a strained relationship, father-daughter manner, but the movie Trouble with a Curve is
Allie. It is her.
Right. And it's so funny because I thought, wow, I was like, we're going to get to talk to her and we can kind of go into how that movie, I mean, again, it sounds like you and your dad have a very good relationship, and there wasn't any like underlying issues that needed to come out. But the fact that you were able to, and you touched on it before, the fact that you were able to go to games with him and start taking notes and kind of almost job shadow really at that young of an age, did you feel like you had a sense of confidence or just, hey, I've been doing this since I was a kid, like I know how to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because when that came out, that was like everyone's immediate reaction to me was like, oh, and I'm like we get along better than that.
Right.
But yeah, I guess like kind of I could see the similarities and whatnot, but yeah, no, for sure, it was definitely, it's exposure, right, at an early age. So like is my favorite when like, oh, like bring your parent to work or to school day, and that's when like career day and whatnot, and it was like my dad gave out baseballs, yeah, like all for it. But like that kind of concept is like, unless you kind of knew somebody, some people don't know what scouts do, like that's not a well-known profession, you know. So especially if you've never really played or you've never gone through recruiting for college or anything like that, you don't necessarily know what scouts do. So it's definitely the exposure at an early age to even just knowing that part of the game. And then when it came to like transitioning into like my own career, it was a lot of, I can relate. Like, so if I speak to our scouts now, it's like, I know what it feels like for you to be on the road all the time, or like, at least I know how your family might feel for you to be on the road all the time. So like, I try to be cognizant, as does my boss, of like, okay, well, how long has he been on the road for? Like, does he need to go home for a little bit, recharge, get back out? Like, just kind of that connection of knowing how they feel or how they might feel helps, you know. And that's kind of any situation, any scenario. It's like, okay, well, the more I can sit at games and feel what it feels like to sit through 9 innings that lasted 4 hours in the sun, like, then you can have a conversation with somebody and they're just not like, this person has no idea what they're talking about, how it feels or whatever. Right. You can just relate with the scouts a little bit more. And it helped in the sense where it didn't feel like, oh, I was coming off fresh and everyone's just like, she has no idea what she's talking about. It was like, okay, like she's done it a little bit, like there's something there. And you just kind of like each year you build on that. You build, I call it like the player bank. Like I've seen 10 guys now, I've seen 20 guys now, I've seen whatever. So I was kind of at least coming in with some feel. Like the baseball industry loves that, oh, we got like that guy has feel or somebody has feel. And it's literally that concept though. It wasn't like I've never been in a clubhouse. It wasn't like I've never been at a stadium. Right. I knew a little bit of how to interact, where to go. It didn't feel all brand new, you know, and that kind of gives you a sense of comfort for sure.
How much of it, of you watching these players, is kind of like the eye test that you're basing things off of versus how often do you use numbers and analytics to bring back and kind of say, okay, like we really like this guy versus, and here's the numbers why, versus, hey, we like this guy because of what we saw today on the field?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a question or debate topic for the last couple of years, right? And it's always been perceived as though scouting and analytics fight each other, right? That's always been like, oh, these two don't get along. And kind of what I wanted to and felt going into it, as do a lot of people, is that it's not this so much as it's this. It's the two combining. It's, would you rather drive with one eye open or would you rather drive with both eyes open? Like, you want to take in as much information as you possibly can. There are things that analytics tell us that the eyes are, it's hard to see. It's just humanly hard to see. And then there are things that analytics can tell us and you can look at and you're like, that's not going to play. It's just not going to happen because you're doing it at high A, but are you going to be able to do it at the major league level is ultimately going to be the question. So it's, yeah, your performance says that, but okay, we need to talk projection. Can he do it later? Can he do it against better competition? So kind of for us, and like I say that with like the Marlins and even other organizations and whatnot, it's kind of been about blending those two worlds. And that was kind of always my thought with a mathematics background, but also playing background, a softball background. Right. Because, hey, I know what it feels like to play, right, not baseball necessarily, but softball. I know how to play the game, and I've watched games and can work on my scouting aspects while also understanding the numbers or being able to relate to our analytics department. And just, no, can I write all that? Maybe not, but like, okay, I can have a conversation with them where I'm interpreting the numbers. And that's essentially what the two is doing. At the end of the day, both want to get the player right. Like that's the goal is to get the player right, to get major league players, to get championship caliber players. And if that means both those two components, both those two departments work as a team, then that's sure as hell what they're going to do, you know? So that's kind of the approach that we've taken as an organization, that I've taken as an individual, is that you want to take all of those pieces of the puzzle in and figure it out. You know, it's not about fighting anybody. It's about figuring it out.
You know, it's Allie, you have been around this for so long, and you can tell when you speak about it. You can tell that like this is very natural to you. And I feel like this is something that we relate on a lot. How often did you go to your dad for advice, and what were some of the main things he spoke to you on to look out for? Do you still kind of go back and forth with him and like pick his brain a lot? I think it's just, I really like want to dive in so hard to this dynamic because I just think it's special, and not everybody has it or understands it. And I feel like when you show up at the ballpark, sometimes people don't know your background yet. Like they're just meeting you. So they might judge you at first, and then they start listening to you and talking to you and say, wait a minute, wait, hold on. Like she's been around this, you could tell. So what kind of influence did your dad have to mold you to where you are right now?
Yeah, for sure. Generally speaking, I feel like anybody kind of going into an industry and being early in the industry and early in your career, it's all about asking questions and finding out what people have done. And like one of the biggest things people have said to me is like, baseball's been here before you and baseball will be here after you. It's not about you as an individual. Like the game has been here for years. So it's all about taking that in and saying, hey, like you've worked here for 30 plus years, like learning from the people who have done that. And like, you have so much to learn when you first start out. You have so much to learn kind of continually throughout your career. So in my case, like that's been my approach with a majority of people that I've met within the game, if not everyone that I've met within the game. I've been lucky enough to call one of them in dad in my contacts. So it is definitely somebody that I can call and tit for tat with, but it's a lot of joking around where it's like, no, don't look at my paper. Like, so it's like, no, your team stinks. Like, and like you talk all that. But yeah, no, it's definitely things that are a little bit more serious of like, even the silly things, right? It's like, hey, like, well, what time do you think I should get there? Like, I'm thinking this, like, I think it's going to take about, scouts love to talk about their travel. I'm like, I'm going to take this. I'm going to take 95. I'm going to take the turnpike or whatever. Like, what do you think? All right. I think I'm going to get there at this time. I think they should be hitting BP around this time. So you get a little bit of feel for like this like stupid things of like, just where to park, what time to get there. And like those things that kind of just come with time and doing it. Right. And you're like, oh, that stadium's like terrible to watch a game at. Like really try to work your schedule and not see a game there. Cause like you're going to be looking straight downhill and you're going to see nothing of the pitches movement or at all. So like those kind of things that they really only learn by doing themselves or somebody had told them. So silly things when it comes to like that. But then you can talk players, and it's just like the same way you would talk with any scout. And it's like, hey, well, I saw him like this. What did you see him? Have you have any history with him? Like, I heard he's this off the field or whatever. And that's kind of, scouting industry is very much so filled with talkers. It's filled with, that's how you get information. It's an information business. So scouts talk to coaches, scouts talk to other scouts, talk to radio people, and you just get to know everybody. And like you said, like people don't know your background. So when I go to the ballpark, if I do something stupid, that's on me. They don't know who that is. That they go, okay, well, she looks ridiculous. Like, what is she doing? Or like, right. And it's going to be my reports. My reports have my name next to them, you know, like that's my opinion. It's what I see. And at the end of the day, that's what I have to answer to. So a lot of that thing for anybody in the industries. And I mean, it goes across different industries where you're going to have people that, you know, that's what you grew up with, or, you know, somebody who did that. And that's how people meet, right? It's all about networking. But then at the end of the day, like you have to be able to back it up. So it's like, okay, they know me from so-and-so, but they'll find out quick whether or not you can actually do the work, you know? So that's always what it comes down to, you know?
Can you talk to me a little bit about, has the female, like, have females grown in this path? Have they grown in this industry? And a little bit about the dynamic you have when, you know, you're talking to the old school scouts versus maybe the newer generation of scouts. Do you have any conflicts there because you're a female, or do you feel like it's becoming a very accepting community?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there's been growth, like in terms of female involvement in baseball in general. I have a very strong-willed mother, and that was the path I took. And with my dad traveling, I spent a lot of time with her, so I am kind of the spit and image. But so it's having strong women and influence in your life, whether or not that's in baseball or not in baseball. But it's one of those things, like I never really noticed. It was never the focus. It was never well, I can't do that. It was just like, this is what I want to do, so I'm going to do it, kind of thing. But definitely a growth within baseball in that sense. Part of the like new school, old school and whatnot. One of the best quotes I've ever heard is like, I'm not new school, I'm not old school, I'm in school. And it's like, I'm here to learn, like whatever it is. I'm not going to fight this, I'm not going to fight that. But just in general, in terms of like meeting people right now, and even when you're starting out, I think a lot of it doesn't necessarily have to do with gender. It has to do with experience, right? So it's like, who is this trying to tell me about what I know when I've been here for 30 years and whatever? So it has less to do about like, oh, it's a girl trying to tell me, and it's more just like, prove yourself, you know? And that's kind of, cool. I've never taken that as like specific to my gender or something like that, but it's when you start to get to know the coaches, it's when you start to get to know the other scouts, that it's not a, who is this, whatever. It's like, okay, like she knows what she's talking about, or he knows what he's talking about, and you actually get to know the person. Then you start talking on the baseball stuff. If you just walk into a room and you're like, you're doing it wrong, like you're not using analytics, or you didn't do this and whatnot, like that's going to get a lot of pushback. That person's not going to get anywhere in terms of combining the new school, old school, or whatever it is, you know, like that's going to get a lot of pushback. But if you actually go in, I'm looking to learn, I'm looking to help you, and kind of what can we do together to get to a better place or get to more wins and get to a championship. Well, that's a different perspective, right? That's a different way of going about it. But just the general of like women in sports for sure. I was lucky to kind of early on have at least some people that I knew about. One that doesn't actually get spoken a lot about is Tyler Taminia. So she helped me. Her father is a scout with the Chicago White Sox, and she did a lot on the marketing side. And she had worked for the Gold Clan Group, which had actually owned, not sure about the ownership now, some of the minor league stadiums, specifically the Hudson Valley Renegades. So that's where I got my first internship. So it was kind of a somewhat odd connection there, but it was someone where she was the daughter of a scout. She's working in the sports industry, not necessarily in scouting, but in marketing. And now she's a very high executive for the National Women's Hockey. So Hockey Association. So it's somebody that like wasn't even directly what I was doing or what I wanted to do, but had a similar background in that she was the daughter of a scout and knew the life of it and wanted to pursue sports. So I didn't know her like super personally, but I knew enough of her kind of in that role. And her name was brought up a lot by my dad when I was first starting out. And then even kind of beyond that, the late Kelly Rodman with the New York Yankees. Yeah. And I worked with her when I was kind of shadowing the Northeast area code team. And not a more positive person on this planet to not a better hype woman. So just like, we've got this, let's do this. And it was great because like she was full blown scouting. She was going to games, and she was the person there that most of the guys had never known before or seen before. And she had played baseball. So it was even a different background. Right. But I was lucky to see both of those women kind of very early on in my internships and in my, like, I guess I call the one an internship. It was more like a volunteer. Like I was like, let me just come. I was like, just let me hang around you, please. But those two women very early on, and then kind of as I've gone into the front office, I see obviously Kimming within our own organization. I see Jean Afferman and all of these great women in even higher roles, in executive level roles, and kind of what that might mean to the younger generation is pretty great.
I think a lot of people, any baseball fan really knows the term scout and kind of has like a a general idea of what they do, but I was curious if you could kind of touch on what kind of training you got when you first got your pro scouting assistant job, and then kind of take us through like a day to day, whether you're in spring training or mid-season or the off season, like what that kind of looks like for you and what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So scouting in general, the best way to at least first minimum break it down would be there's international scouting, amateur scouting, and pro scouting. So international is both amateur and pro parts of it. So you're either amateurs, which you're seeing guys that end up being into the international signing. So those are your guys who are signing very young. They're 16, 17 years old when they're signing, whether that be out of the DR or the Bahamas or wherever it be. Then you also have your international pro, which tend to be a lot more of your players that are coming over from the KBO or the NPB, in that international realm where they might be older, and they're coming directly most often into your higher levels as opposed to right into your rookie league teams. And then you have your amateur guys that are obviously they're scouting for the draft. So those are the ones that are coming out of high school or coming out of college, where MLB draft day is entirely focused on them. The realm that I'm in is pro scouting. So that specifically focuses on anybody once they are a professional baseball player. So that is rookie leagues all the way up through the major leagues. So that's every team's affiliates, and then indie leagues on top of that. So once you're a pro baseball player, you kind of fall underneath our realm. Basically, our scouts are going out to see players, write reports in case that player becomes available, whether that's a release, whether that's a trade, or something called waiver wires, and different types of transactions and ways of acquiring players. So these are not necessarily going to be, or I should say there's also the Rule 5 draft. So there's multiple ways in which a team can acquire a player, and that's kind of where pro scouting comes in. It's the players with another team and we want that player, or we're going to trade our player, and that kind of transaction occurs. That's where pro scouting would come in. So for me, in terms of even training, it's a lot of it's training by doing, right? It's kind of nothing can fully prepare you as much as going out and doing it. Right. So it's even in the beginning, and this is kind of where like the internships help for those things to just, you see more players. Anybody who wants to go into scouting, the first thing I tell you is like, go see players. Like looking at a computer and watching a PowerPoint is really not going to help you know what to look for, kind of thing. Like you can read a definition of like, okay, what is good command? What is a good slider, and that by words, but like, go watch the player, go watch the great players and see, okay, well, that's an 80. That's, well, I guess first learn the scale, 20-80 scale, but go find out, kind of look at major league players, right? And the best thing you can do is calibrate your eyes. We call it calibrating. So go see a major league player, right? Because ultimately you want the player that you're seeing at 16, 19, 20 to eventually become a major league player. And that's the scale that you're working on, right? You want them to become major league players. So calibrating, figure out, go see players. So it starts from see as many as you can, and then it's start talking to people about him. Like, oh, like, what do you like about him? Oh, why do you think that he can stick at shortstop? Oh, like you just saw that throw. Like, what do you got on that throw? What do you think that throw is? Like, how would you grade out that throw? So, and even when I first got my job, so then it became like, okay, well, you're going to go cover a team. Like I live in Jupiter, so I'm based out of our minor league complex. So I have the luxury of having our rookie league team. And then prior to this year, it was our Florida State League team. So it was go sit out a game nearly every night and go watch a player or go watch the team. Now try to write reports. Now it's a consistent learning of like making sure you're using the same language. And like when you say average, is it actually average? And if you put a 50 on something, well, then it has to be average. Or if you say something's plus, well, it's got to be a 60 or above. So just kind of learning the nuances of the language, and that can come from reading report, or that can kind of like grow from reading reports, from writing reports. But at the end of the day, it's literally go out and see players, watch games. And obviously 2020 was a tough year for that, but it's watching as many games as you can and just getting a feel for the language and that part of it, which is kind of continuously growing. Like you'll have guys who are their first year scouts and they're like, oh, those reports were terrible. Like when they're like 5 years down, because they get a little feel, they have a little bit more of their own writing style and whatnot. So it's definitely a skill that continues to develop and grow, like as you see more players and as you just see more games. was a long-winded way of explaining.
No, that honestly, you just taught me so much. I want you to keep going, to be honest. I was just so locked into what you were saying. Like it's incredible to hear that, because we don't hear scouts' perspectives often. We don't understand how many moving parts there are. And not only that, you're watching these players, like you said, all the time, but what people don't realize, what players might not even realize sometimes, is you hold a very big key component to their futures. You are analyzing and breaking down everything these guys are doing. Like you said earlier, sometimes it's by their analytics and their numbers, and sometimes it's really by the eye test of just understanding and watching someone. And it's not always just about what I've heard a couple scouts say, and I'm glad this is a point that they bring up, and I want you to touch on this and give me your thoughts on this. You're watching all these players, you're watching all these different backgrounds, ages, maturity levels, and everybody thinks it's just about home runs and defense, right? How important is it, and how zoned in are you when you're watching players' character? What do they teach you and talk to you about when you're watching how players act on the field, how they act off the field, how they address the media? I'm very curious to understand how much character goes into scouting a player.
100%. Makeup is definitely a well-discussed topic across all scouting departments as well. Like whether or not you're getting that player in the draft and you actually get to go into his home and speak with his parents and get to know his life there. On the pro side, it's a little bit of digging worth it, because we don't go to their houses. We don't get to know the parents of every player that we go and see, but you're watching the game. So it's how intense, what's his intensity level on the field? What's the effort level on the field? So you're judging those things while you're watching the game. And then it's like, okay, well, he just struck out for the third time, went into the dugout, threw everything, punched a Gatorade thing. And it's like, well, what is he doing after that? Right? What is he doing after he fails in particular? Right? So it's everybody's the greatest person ever when they're going great, but like, how do they actually respond when things are going poorly? And those are things that you're seeing at the game, right? And then it's okay, well, what is his life like outside of the field? And like, okay, is he committed to playing, or is he spending his time, or maybe he shouldn't be spending his time, or is he getting into trouble? Is he getting suspended? And like, what kind of things are going on there? And ultimately part of those things from the prospects or from the players who are younger, it's what's going to impede their ability to be the best they can be, right? So is there something that's going to stop them? Sometimes it's a mentality. It's they don't have the right mentality, the right dedication to it, the right effort level, and those things that you're seeing kind of on the field. Or there's an off the field issue that's going to stop them from being the best that they can be. That might concern you, and like, hey, it's really not going to work out because he does X, Y, and Z on his free time. And like, that's really just that's not something that we want. And then from the major league side, ultimately, and especially when you're acquiring somebody who's going to go into your major league clubhouse, they are going to affect everyone there. So we've all been on a team where there's one person that's negative Nelly, that's not interested, doesn't want to be there. And like, if that's who you're bringing into the clubhouse, well, that's going to spread. It's the quote unquote cancer of the team, is that's going to spread. And it's a negative influence. And it's, who are you bringing in to your major league clubhouse? Like, they need to have some sort of fit there as well, just because of the impact that they can have on everybody else, right? And you take it from that's all the negative views, but then you have your great makeup players, the players that make people better around them. So it's like, hey, they might not even have had a great game, but they pumped up so-and-so and he had a great game. And it's all about how they're interacting with each other, especially at the major league level. It's just, what kind of vibe do they bring to the clubhouse? And are they going to get along with guys, or is this person going to make it absolutely miserable for everyone to be there for 162 games? Like, it's not like, oh, once a week we have to put up with this guy. It's every day. It's a long season. It is spring training. It is everything. So definitely from a pro's perspective, it's a pro scouting perspective. It's, well, what are we bringing into the clubhouse there? And then from a development, is what's going to impede him from developing, or is he going to outplay his tools, or it's something where he's going to maximize his tools, or it's the player that he's got good tools, but he'll be great because he's going to put absolutely everything into it. And it's like that player that's going to elevate his game just because the dedication is there, the mindset is there. And it's that elevation that a scout's going to be like, oh, you know what, like we can get even more out of him. Like
Right.
he's going to be even better than what we just flat out think he is based off of his tools. Is that player a championship caliber player? Well, now let's get into who that person really is, who that player is. They're people, At the end of the day, they are people, and people play this game. So you got to get to the core of who they are.
Well, I love that, Alexa, one, that you asked that question, and because it's a great question. And I think it's a component that not everybody thinks of right off the bat, because you hear all the time, like, oh, is he, fans will talk about like, oh, is he a good guy off the field, or,
Right.
Or, oh, they seem like they have an attitude, or quite the opposite, where it's like, hey, that guy really looks like he's got a great impact on the team. When I was getting recruited to play in college, one of the biggest things my coach would always stress was, you never know when somebody's watching you.
Yes.
And you always need to, whether you hit a home run or you strike out, you need to carry yourself the same way. And it's funny because they can say that until they're blue in the face, but it's going to really be it's on each individual person kind of to do with that what they will. And so I'm curious for you, you went through the recruiting process as well for yourself, and you were on a team for however many years. So do you think that when you're watching players now, do you think that being a former player yourself and being around teammates that you can see either build up or bring down a team, do you think that gave you a little bit extra feel, so to speak, when you're watching these players and their body language, like on the field and in the dugout?
Yeah, I think it definitely gives you kind of know either how you reacted or like how it felt when another teammate did that, or it's like what kind of vibe that gave the whole clubhouse, or the whole bus ride back was horrible because of that. And it's definitely part of that. And even as the part of the recruitment process, like people want to know who they're getting into or who they're bringing into their programs, and who's going to actually put in the time and dedication. And so that's part of it too. I mean, from a recruiting process, from the draft process, of stressing it to like younger players about how equally important it is to be that person all the time, or that person on the field, off the field. Even a scouting person, you never know who's watching, but you also never know who knows who, right? So like, you don't know,
right?
You can be sitting somewhere and you're talking bad things about something so-and-so to that person. Well, you have no idea that person is going to call me later. They're going to let me know what you just said about all that. So it's a lot of, you don't know connections, you don't know who people are, you don't know who's watching you, and like those types of things. Like, we want to watch you when you don't think we're watching you. Some guys have a little bit more of an edge than others, but it's what line it is, it's the impact that it has on the clubhouse, and it's what kind of teammate are they, and all of those things. That not everybody has to necessarily be at church service on Sunday, but it's what's your impact on the team, and what's actually detrimental to you versus what's okay. And like, somebody can be okay. It can be perfectly fine makeup. They can be just, they're in the clubhouse. They don't negatively impact anybody. They don't positively impact anybody. But you hear it talked a lot about when it comes to like the veteran players. Oh, he has a veteran presence, because those guys bring positive influence, right? They bring years of experience, and some of them are more willing than others to guide younger guys in, and like those types of things. So that's where you kind of hear it probably the most vocal out in media or something like that, is the veteran presence kind of thing. But there's something to be spoken about of just kind of how it is in a clubhouse, and being on a team. You've seen, hey, like we all look to that person, we all look to the senior, or maybe we didn't look to the senior, maybe the person was younger and they have that personality or those leadership qualities where they just stepped up, and it was that kind of teammate in there. So even when you're kind of building your team at the major league level, it's what impact are all those pieces going to have, who's going to mentor that younger player and has that influence on your club, and for us, that's even a bigger thing when we have young guys coming up, is who's going to be that veteran presence to guide those guys along. And those guys have to have a high makeup, good quality guys that are doing that. Because if you bring in somebody that's uninterested in the next generation, or uninterested in building that with them, and even like somebody like Miggy Rowe for us, who's been great with leading our club and bringing everybody together and embracing that leadership role, as well as the veteran role, and bringing up the younger guys with them, and being on the backfields and talking stuff with younger guys. Like that's not a quality every player has, you know? Right. So that's something special that we have in him, and have him as a person that's willing to do that, you know? So it's like, it's the little asterisks, it's the differentiators, it's that makes him special, that makes him important to our club, you know?
Because it's something that I think gets forgotten, and these guys want to hustle so hard, and they work hard every day, and they want to hit home runs, and they want to make every catch, and you know, whatever the position is that you're looking at, and you forget that you're also being looked at as a person. You're looked at as a leader. You want to be this major leaguer and sign this big contract and make all this money and have all this fame and success. Yeah, but you have to remember, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing a team, an organization, and you're representing a future. You're leading people that are fans that want to be like you one day. And you don't think about that, because at the same time, like you said, they are normal people. They go home to families like we do, and they sit and play video games, or they go out with their friends, or they hang out. Like, they are normal people like us, and they're allowed to be. They should be. It keeps them mentally sane. But I just think that a lot of the times we don't talk about character. We don't talk about how important that is in a process. And these young athletes who work so hard to get to the highest level, sometimes they have to be reminded of those things. And it's good to hear from a professional organization and from a scout and someone who's seeing it, that it really is true. It does matter.
You brought up like the idea of like pride and like being bigger than yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it's huge, like especially like when you wear a logo, right? Because they're representing our entire organization. And it was something that was like even instilled in our team in college. It was like, well, when you wear something, Ramapo College softball, somebody doesn't go, oh, that's Alex did that. It goes, a Ramapo College softball player did that.
Yes,
that's right.
So it immediately goes to the program. It immediately goes to the school, and it has nothing to do about what your last name is, what your first name is, like where you come from, whatever. It has everything to do with what logo you are wearing, what team you're on, and everything like that. So it's just that concept that you said, like, really hit that. And it's just, we instilled that a lot in our younger guys, is like, you're wearing this logo. There's pride to this logo. There is a sense of responsibility when you wear this logo. You're representing yourself. You're representing our club. You're representing your team. Some of them are representing their countries, their families, their countries back home. It's so much more than just you on the field or you off the field. You represent so much more. So that really got me.
I have to ask, because I'm incredibly curious, how often, if at all, do you interact with Don Mattingly and or Derek Jeter?
And or Kim Ang? No big deal. Just some.
Well, we were going to get to her. I just figured those two are my big time, like, oh my God, you know, every kid up in the tri-state area is wondering the answer to this question.
Yeah. For anybody watching the thing, like, I'm repping Jersey behind me, so it's definitely in the blood.
Right.
Well, that's like the immediate question I do get asked from people back home, like when I first got hired and whatnot, is like, oh, have you met him? So I will say, out of the three, I do interact with Don Mattingly probably the least, just because he is on field. So I've been in the same room. I've introduced myself. We've spoken. But he is on the field, and he is worried about much larger things than just little me. So but I have gotten to know him a little bit, and he's very nice, very, very relaxed person, because he's California vibes, but
yes,
definitely a complete icon. And then obviously coming from the tri-state area, Derek Jeter is everything. There was at least one player on your team wearing number 2 solely because of Derek Jeter. So it is definitely a tri-state thing. I told him recently that I may or may not have had a cardboard cutout of him in our 5th grade classroom. He was not thrilled with me dating that. But I did grow up, my 5th grade teacher had a cardboard cutout of him, big Yankees fan. So it's something that's a household name in the Northeast that is well known for sure. So I do get to interact with him a little bit when he does visit our Jupiter complex where I am based out of. So definitely a very cool moment for me. Made sure to remind him of his Jersey roots because I know things technically say he grew up in Michigan, which I get he spent a majority of his life, but he was born in Pequannock.
That's right. Yes, he was.
Preach it. Which is like 15 minutes from where I grew up, if that. So it's like, I was like, no. You have Jersey roots. Don't you forget. Don't you forget that. But yeah, so I have gotten to interact with him a little bit. And I'll do a quick little story for that because it's kind of like my funny moment for sure. Because only I would do this. But like it was one of my first, at least the first or second year, and we had come in from a night spring training game, and I guess I went in a different entrance than he did, and so I'm inside, and the door is locked at the front, and it's him and our VP right behind him. So I just open up the door just a little bit, and go, I'm sorry, who are you? And just like just a little bit, and he just starts laughing, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll let you in. And the VP behind him's like, I don't think she was gonna let you in. Like,
oh my God.
And I was like, this is my moment. I have to do it.
It's amazing.
This is great. Take advantage of this moment.
Oh my God.
And then Kimming. I mean, I've had the privilege of meeting her before being hired. But in person, I mean, it's funny because you can meet so many people with different personalities, right? And sometimes you kind of think that the person at the top is always going to be the loudest, right? And it's not the case. And she's somebody for me that I thought this when she was on a panel too. Her personality is a little different than some of the personalities that you see. It's a quieter personality, but when she speaks, you listen. Like it is silent because what comes out of her mouth is there's such volume to what she's saying. And it was the same when she was on the panel. It's not the most boisterous person, but it's intent when she speaks. It's important when she speaks and what she has to say and like her experiences. And it's interesting to see a different personality in that role, in the role that she's in now. And even on the panels of somebody so high up, and then you're like, it's not, these roles and these positions aren't for one person, aren't for one type of person or one personality. And I think that she really even embodies that. It's just like, these roles are made for people who are great at their jobs. I remember I decided then I was actually driving, I was making my way up to New Jersey, and of course, no big news was happening 2 days before, but on my drive to Jersey, my phone just starts blowing up of just like, I'm like, what is going on? And it goes, Miami Marlins are, oh, okay. I don't have to pull over for this one. Like, pull over. I got texts and all this from like calls from everyone. Like, did you see? And it was just like, all right, this is pretty cool. Like, this is a cool moment. And it's not just, I feel very lucky and blessed where it's not just somebody in the industry. To me, it is the person I get to work with and interact with and be a part of this moment for her. And work with her. It's been exciting so far, and we have a lot more work to do.
I love what you said when you said, because I believe this is, and we can go back and look. When we talked to Liz Ben, do you know Liz, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
When we talked to her about Kim Eng, and I love that you said this too. Almost verbatim, you both said when she speaks, you listen.
Yes.
And I love that because it's clear that regardless of who she's interacted with, she remains constant. And I love to hear that about people that, oh, this isn't just one person's experience with her, but multiple, and that she has that lasting impact of, she isn't the loudest person in the room, but when she says something, everybody's focused on her and everybody's taking in what she's saying. And I think that that's really impactful, and that's really cool that she's doing that, not just to a couple people, but it seems like across the board.
Yeah. No,
for sure. She definitely holds a room, and it's one of those things where it's like, you know that it's coming from such a place of experience and such a place of thoughtfulness when she speaks, that you're like, okay, like there's weight to this, and you're like, hold on, like let me jot this one down. But but so far so good. And I look forward to working with her more as we get into the nitty gritty of trade deadlines and whatnot as we move forward. So it's exciting.
Now I need to know, Alex, you have now recently been a part of you've recently been promoted, I should say. So one, congratulations. Within the last year, now your official title is Pro Scouting Manager. And you are also a part of the NY Pro Scouts Association. Can we talk a little bit about that? Talk about what that means, who that necessarily represents, and what your role is within that organization. Do you have involvement? What do they do to spread awareness?
Yeah, for sure. They'll love the little plug here too. So shout out to the New York Pro Scouts Association. Mainly because they've totally taken on a larger media role in the past year, because 2020 forced everyone to. So people who would not have otherwise have had Instagrams have Instagrams now because of this. Because they do a lot of interviews and things like that with people within the game as well, to like, as over 2020, when people were just craving any sort of baseball conversation, took a jump there to spread it. So yeah, I mean, I'm a member of it. So I'm simply a member of it. I will say my dad is the president of it. So it does help a little bit there.
All right.
Kind of where I was introduced to it at a younger age, where I had at first I was just a family member going to a dinner and whatnot. And then it became, okay, you have to be voted in. So they did. Whether or not they were threatened, I don't know, but they somehow agreed to let me in. But so it's something where like now I'm a member. So basically in normal years, they have meetings primarily in the off season because guys are out traveling, and it does primarily consist of scouts and coaches from the Northeast area. So kind of each area kind of has their own association. So there is like a Mid-Atlantic association and things like that. But obviously being from the Northeast, that's the focus there. Very underrated areas sometimes, but so we like to represent anything good that's going on up there in the baseball world, kind of building that fraternity, if you will, of getting to know other people in the game, and specifically people from your area. So that's essentially what the association is. And then they spread, hey, like things about baseball, things that are going on in the Northeast, supporting Northeast players and what's going on up there, as well as just getting people in scouts and within the baseball worlds to getting to know each other. And it all sort of leads up to a dinner that they have in the off season, where they award a scout, a coach. There's like various different awards that they go through every year to just recognize specifically people in the Northeast and job well done and what they've done, and focusing on a player who's about to make it into the major leagues from the area, and those types of things, and just supporting Northeast baseball all the way around. Being a part of the association has been even bigger, I think, than anticipated, in the sense that this is one of those, the moment of like perspective, I guess, when you're talking to people about networking when they're looking for jobs, is I basically kind of interviewed without knowing that I was interviewing at one of these dinners. So I was sitting next to, at the time, Jim Cuthbert, who at the time was the director of pro scouting for the Miami Marlins. And ultimately he ends up kind of talk with him, have a conversation, thinking absolutely nothing of it, of, hey, this is what I'm just doing. This is what I'm trying to do. This is what I want to do. He ends up calling me maybe a couple weeks, maybe a month later, and saying, hey, I might have an opportunity for an entry level position. Would you be interested? And it was something, so just like, didn't know I was interviewing, didn't know he would be in a position to hire or anything like that. And it was just right place, talking to somebody within the organization. He's from the Northeast, happened to be at the association and or at that dinner, and got to talking about my background and whatnot. And it turned into a potential opportunity. He ended up hiring me. He's not with the Marlins right now, but I owe everything to him giving a chance for me, and it's a situation where it was just, I didn't even know that I was talking to somebody like that. And I don't think yes could leave my mouth fast enough when he asked. But it was definitely a moment of, okay, like, you never really know. And you talked about never knowing who you're talking to or anything like that.
Right. I was going to say, this combo just came full circle. You were
circle
getting scouted
moment.
and you didn't even realize it. That's incredible.
Full circle moment, and definitely I do not want to not say how grateful I am to him to even take the opportunity and or to give me the opportunity, I should say, because it's important to realize that like anybody in their position, nobody got there by themselves. I mean, there was always somebody that either took them under their wing or said, hey, like you haven't proved, when you're starting out, like you don't have a ton of experience, you haven't proven yourself yet, but somebody has to take a chance on you, you know? So he was that person for me. So it's definitely a thank you to him for sure while we're at it.
We will let you go soon, but I do want to touch on, because I think this is super cool. And I think that that you play a big role in this is you're wearing a shirt that says Miami Bottom Feeders, right? and for those who don't know, who aren't so in touch with the NL East, you know, they wore those shirts because you guys were pretty much at the bottom of the NL East in 2019. Mm-hmm. And then last year, I think one of the more impressive storylines of the season was you guys being hit hard with the virus. Yeah. And then your next group of players stepping up and taking on in a shortened season in something that has just never happened before. For them to step in, kind of hold ground where they needed to, and then for the team to make a push for the playoffs and then win that wild card round. I feel like if it's not, it's one of the most rewarding aspects of your job. I mean, can you touch on how you felt last year when all of this was happening?
So, I mean, to start with it's starting to be a culmination of all of our departments, right? It's players that we've traded for and that we are bringing in from the pro side. There are players that we have drafted that are starting to make their impacts from the amateur realm. There are players that we have signed internationally that are starting to make their impacts. So it's really, you're seeing on top of even scouting, now you're talking about player development, right? So now once they're in the system, you're talking about all of our coaching staff that have helped develop them and get them even better. So you're starting to see that culmination, right? From going from a build to competing and seeing that part of it. So the whole like bottom feeders thing is even funny because it's one thing to get the crap from people, whatever, right? For oh, your team's not winning or things like that, whatever, fine. In this case, it was somebody on air that had said it, and it had gotten back to our players, and that's where you start to see that pride, because it went from like ho, like what are you talking about here? Like we put in the work, we got guys here with some talent, like let's show you what we can do, and it became this rallying cry of just like, go ahead, call us bottom feeders, dare ya. Like it was like, we got this, okay. And it's great because that's done from the players. I mean, that was like we as a front office, everybody's in this game, we're all competitive, right? I mean, that's part of the nature of coming from sports. You're competitive, you have that part of it. So it was even funnier just to like, you're seeing it from the players. You saw them say, hey, like we're putting in hours. We're putting in work. We got guys here that can do things. And if you don't think so, we'll show you so. And it was awesome to see that. And then even kind of get hit with the adversity early on of COVID. It was great to see that it continued. It was, and that's a leadership thing. That's a leadership in the clubhouse of just like, hey, you got here, like fill in, pick up, like this is where we left off. This is where we're going. Right. So it was great to see kind of that continue to go. And that's a culture thing. Like that's something that's built in the clubhouse, that's built within the whole organization to step up, fill in and do your job. Like you're expected to come in there and do a job. And that's what those guys did. And it was great to see. I used to joke around with my dad because I was lucky enough to be a part of our first NJAC with Ramapo. So we got brandy new rings, all pretty. I looked at him, I go, it's a placeholder for my World Series ring. Like it's a placeholder. Like, okay, like this is what it is right now. I'm in college. Like this is what my ring is right now. I was like, it's coming. Like, okay, we got this one now. We want more. Like it's 100% that taste of it, right? You're like, okay, like it's happening. We got this. It's going. So it's definitely the little bit, you know, it's not you're not finished yet. There's more to do. And even where we got it. It's great to surprise people and things like that. And I still think we are going to surprise some people because there's still definitely some doubt there. So it's still that underdog mentality, I guess, a little bit right now, but it's a taste for the organization. And it's funny because it's like the next day, right, you win or whatever, and then get kicked out. The next day is like, all right, well, next year, what do we do? Like, it's an immediate, I think it's like it might be a Gatorade commercial or something like that, where it's like they do the rep and then they're like, next day. And it's like, you just like go right back to it. But like, it's 100% that kind of like concept where it was like, okay, well, now we got to do this. Or we won, and now it's like, we won and now we're advancing. Okay, well, now we need to do some advanced work. Now, how are we going to beat the next team? It's like, we can celebrate, you get an hour. Like, let's go. Like, what's next? And it's a lot of that competitive edge of like, what can we do next and what can we do next year? And I would definitely just sum it up with saying like, it was a little taste and now we just want more. There's more to do, and we all know it. So get to it.
It set the tone to show what kind of teammate chemistry you guys have. It set the tone for how the organization immediately backed them. And there's so many examples of different sports where something like this, it starts from just an announcer or someone being silly, making a joking term or a threat or a comment, and you take it, and instead of being like slammed down on it, like, yeah, we suck, like right now, no, you turn it around and you say, hey, what you said, like, oh, they're laughing at us, that's cute, okay, let's go. Like, that should fire you up. And that's the energy you want to see throughout all of sports. And it shows the kind of leadership you have that starts in that clubhouse and it trickles throughout the organization. And now it's nice to hear, and you shed light on some of the names that you were talking about earlier in this interview that people might not recognize, or they are seeing now more, and just what the Marlins are going to bring, what we can expect to see them, how we're going to see them grow. And I hope to see that throughout more of baseball, to be honest. I think it just brings a chemistry. It brings a chemistry, and you guys, you set the tone.
And what do people say? I mean, it's funny to me because it's something that like we even said playing, growing up, whatever, it goes, they're a great team on paper. They're a great team on paper.
Right.
They should win everything with what they have on paper. Well, you know what doesn't play? Paper. So it goes, okay, well, the team needs to play. So it goes, we can say all we want that all the metrics say that this team should win and everything like that because they have the player who hit this and whatnot. But I went in as a player that any team can win on any given day. And that was what I was taught growing up. That is what I stand by, is any team can win any given day. And it's you don't automatically just show up and win 162. Like, that's not how it works, Right. You have to play every single one of those. So it's something, you can't win 2 games at once and you can't lose all of them at once. So we're going to show up and we're going to do it with what we got today, and we're going to find a way and figure it out. So
what is maybe something that you can share to the younger generation that's coming into the scouting world on what to focus on, or what is something that can give them a kickstart?
A kickstart is do the things that you can do when you're not actually with somebody. So like, you're always focusing on just figuring out what your niche can be. Right? Is it not understanding numbers a little bit more? Is it having a background in something else? Like, just kind of what can set you apart, and then doing the most you can even before you get hired is like we talked about before, right? Going to games and seeing players and doing all of those things. Sure. So the more that you can do that, and then just genuinely talking with people. If you go to games, you're going to run into scouts. You're going to talk to scouts. It's not always the immediate of like, hey, do you know anything about a job? It's like, hey, can you read this? What do you think about this? Or just those sort of small things where it's informational interviews, right? It's learning about them, learning about their background, going into the process of trying to learn as much as I can. And you get kind of stuck of like, I'm only going to learn from this person. Like, you can learn from everyone. You can learn from every experience, and just being willing and open to take all of that in as you go. Figure it out.
I love that. So before we let you go, this will just be fun. I have some.
The rest of that was not fun.
I just felt that was so much information. This one's going to be less of you having to think and more of just rapid fire. We're going to do some rapid fire questions. So these are just quick little it's just going to be a bunch of your favorite things, so it shouldn't be hard. And I'm a little concerned about that look because now these are things that should come right off the top of your head. So I've got like, I think maybe 10 or 11.
Ooh, Dons, you did some homework. Okay.
They're going to be
Love
fun.
it.
I think you're just, I think you'll just be able to rattle them off. So
Yeah.
ready?
Let's
Okay.
go.
All right. Favorite thing to cook?
Stromboli.
Oh, love that. Good answer. Favorite family game?
My favorite, Monopoly. Nobody else's favorite, but my favorite.
Whichever one you're winning at, right?
Yeah, that was a lot of board flips when I was younger.
Favorite TV show?
I'm gonna have to go with The Bachelor. Sorry. Everyone can hate me.
No, I watch it too.
Guilty pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. Favorite artist?
Ooh, right now I'm really digging on Lee Bryce. So
Love
going
him.
country.
Love him. Favorite song?
Soul is one by him most recently.
I knew you were gonna say that when you said Lee
Oh
Bryce.
my gosh,
That's
I'm
so
like
funny.
obsessed with it right now. Obsessed.
Love that. Favorite place you've traveled to?
Ooh. Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard off of Cape Cod.
Beautiful. Favorite baseball player of all time?
Yadi Molina. Sorry. I did grow up a Cardinals fan with my dad, so I mean,
That
greatest
makes
catcher.
sense.
Greatest catcher of all time.
That
Can't
is
be
a
mad.
great response. One of
Can't
my
be
top
mad.
5.
That's
Perfect.
wonderful. Favorite food spot in New Jersey?
One of my favorite spots just closed down. So it's a sad moment for 2020, but it was Esposito's best sub place, was Italian sub place right there in East Hanover. They just closed down, but that was the place to go.
Shout out.
High expectations when I go back. Ooh, Clifton Pizza. I'll give them, if you want to go pizza, Clifton Pizza is like where it's at. Yeah. It's
Dons,
actually
we're not far from there, Dons. We can take a road trip with Allie when she comes home.
I was gonna say we'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
The parents found that one, and they might be mad that I'm sharing the secret, but it's like a must go when oh gosh, now you got me like thinking that and Jose Tejas are the two must goes.
Oh
yeah, I love Jose Tejas.
Easily
Okay.
Jose Tejas.
Love
It's all
it.
about the food when I go back. I'm like, hold on.
Love it. Okay, favorite food spot in Florida?
Calaveras.
Okay.
Calaveras Cantina. Real good. That's my place every time.
Favorite leisure activity?
Leisure activity. My favorite is probably just like hanging out, watching a movie and whatever. But if I'm going out and doing something a little interesting, or the weird thing about me is I'm like trying to go back into doing pottery stuff. So I like did a little bit in high school. And it's something like I'm not necessarily good at all, but like something that's just like a completely different realm. A screen is not in my face. You're doing something a little bit more creative, and like it's super different for me. But that's also helpful is it's just kind of like a different part of my brain that's getting used, and the rest of it can just kind of break for a little bit. So
That's very cool.
definitely a
Love
sneaky hobby there.
Now you mentioned you like going to the spa.
Yes.
Favorite spa treatment?
Ooh.
Massage for sure. I'm like a simple massage because like the hot stone kind of hurts a little bit. I'm not so sure about that, but my mom made the mistake of taking me for my 16th birthday, and I've been hooked ever since.
It was over.
Well, like playing softball, they're like, you should really get one like every 3 months. I'm like, I agree.
Like, yeah, go tell my mom that, please.
Yeah, sign me for the year
like,
package now,
"Jeez, do you
please.
hear that?" Yes, facts for sure.
I got one more for you. What's your favorite aspect of Marlins Park?
My favorite aspect of Marlins Park. They have the bobblehead museum in like the back where they have a ton of them back there. And it's just something super cool and silly. And it's like, I grew up with a bunch of them at my house. Like, it's just that like straight fandom, you know, something unique to our ballpark and just really interesting. I don't know. I feel like any fan can just go back there, see it, and it's something unique to us. So
Awesome. Those were great answers. So
whew.
now that we know you passed, you gave us all your favorite things.
I know about myself. Love that. Well, thank you guys for having me on. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun.
Yes, Allie, you were
Yeah, you're amazing.
fantastic. And you know what? We just had so much fun. I'm not kidding. And I think Donna can agree with me that we easily could keep you for 2 more hours with just the incredible stories you have, the knowledge you're providing us with. And you could just tell how passionate you are about what you do. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this interview is that when you love what you do and you want to continue learning about it more and more, it resonates and it shows, and it's actually very contagious. So I hope that if anything, people are taking that away, that how, just passionate you can be about this game on all different levels and all different angles. And you taught us something extremely exciting tonight. So thank you for joining us. And
Yes,
we
thank you
hope to
so
have you
much.
back on again soon for sure.
You are very welcome. This was a blast.